Join me for a conversation where I talk to the designers behind the Battlelords of the 23rd century.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Matt, and I am your host. This is the podcast where we learn how to become better game masters and role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. In keeping with that mission, I have an awesome interview today where I talk to 3 incredible game designers. It is my pleasure today to welcome 3 guests to the podcast. They are the masterminds behind Battlelords of the 23rd century. Anthony Oliveira, David Soruco, and Kurt Willis. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So I like to ask first-time guests how they were introduced to tabletop role-playing games. So maybe Tony, could you start us off?
I don't want to date myself here, but probably the same way most people my age did. It was back in the early 80s with Dungeons and Dragons.
And then I take it you kept playing Dungeons and Dragons for a while?
I kept playing, and then I was really looking for a different genre. So it was at that time pickings were slim, but eventually I found other games like Star Frontiers and Top Secret and BattleTech, and I've just been going ever since.
I played a ton of Star Frontiers. Yeah, although I actually still have the books from when I was a kid, and I dug them out a couple years ago, and I don't think I've ever played by the actual rules, judging from some of my character sheets.
Most people haven't.
Yeah. All right. Kurt.
Well, I started with the D&D basic box set and went on from there into Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and kept going with that for a while. But some friends end up going, hey, let's look at this game. And since they wanted me to GM it, I ended up learning the rules for, I think the first one was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then we went on to Shadowrun, and another friend decided he wanted to do BattleTech, so we got into that as well. And then many, many years later, I run into Dave and Tony, and they introduced me into Tony's first entry into rewriting games, which was Blood of Heroes. And we played that, and then they said, hey, let's play some Battlelords. And I'm like, okay, what's this? And here we are, 20 years later, guys?
Yep.
Nice. I played Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as well. Probably didn't do it by the rules either. So, but I had a lot of fun with that game.
It was a blast.
Yeah. All right, Dave, how about yourself?
Back in my day, we used to walk uphill. There's snow both ways just to play a game. We had to make our own dice, actually. So that's actually a literal thing. So back when they released the basic set, I'm not going to put the date on that, but you can go wiki it. And yes, I'm older than dirt. I think it was pretty cool when they brought along dirt, because that made it a lot easier to grow food. Anyway, so basic D&D is where I started way back when, and advanced D&D when that was first edition, way back in the original little booklets. All of those were where I started. And Travelers, those were the first 2 game sessions, playing many late nights with friends, hanging out, coming up with really cool ideas, taking the systems and applying the other kind of genres out of the science fiction and fantasy books that we've been reading. Then after that, it was like, let's see, Gangbusters, Fiddle with Boot Hill, never did Gamma World, Star Frontiers. There was one that was set in the Vietnam War that I'm drawing a blank on it. Recon, yes, Recon. That's that one. Then let's see, there was also Traveler 2000, or Twilight 2000, sorry. Twilight 2000. There was the other version of Traveler that was, again, I'm talking the early 80s. Star Frontiers, I think I mentioned. Top Secret, several different editions of that. TSR was the better one. Or was it? Which one was it, Tony? That was the better one?
Top Secret SI.
SI, thank you.
Basically the second edition. I love that game.
Yeah, lots of fun. By the way, Millennium's End, also in that genre. Do not play it like you're playing Top Secret. It doesn't go well. Highly realistic game played like your James Bond-esque kind of a gameplay doesn't go well. All of a sudden, people start dying all over the place. It's only funny it's a train wreck kind of bad. So eventually ran into Tony in college and got exposed to Battlelords. Got hooked into that, and then also got introduced to Mayfair's DC Hero system, and then worked with Tony to kind of tweak that system. He owned it, and we just kind of pitched in here and there on that, and eventually the opportunity to help with Battlelords and take it over present itself, and we got together and was like, we got to do this. So we did, and that kind of brings us up to modern times.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I certainly remember making dice, or at least little pieces of paper with numbers on them that I would put in a pencil holder or something and shake around and pull out a number. But it kind of reminded me, though, of something. Do you guys, it sounds like we are of similar age, because I've played D&D the first time in 1982. But I was wondering if you had this experience too, where you got some dice and you had to color
Ink
the numbers in.
Yes, the little crayons. Yes.
Yeah, yep. I have them both.
I still have those dice somewhere, and I freak my kid out when I tell him, back in my day, we had to paint our own dice.
And I don't know if you know this, but do you know what the origins of those dice were?
No.
They are the regular solids. There is a group of polyhedra that are all regular. So you've got like the 6-sided die is all squares, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Every single face is the same. The 10-sided die came along later. So it was really trying to get that group that was used for geometry. The 4-sided dice, 6, 8, 12, and 20 are all polyhedra that have exactly the same face for every face. And they're kind of unique. And they were where things started. And the original, air quotes, 10-sideds were really you just took a 20-sided that you didn't color both sides of, or you just used just the 0 or the 1. 0 to 9, and you didn't worry about whether you had colored it in or not to indicate it was above 10 or below 10. So, yeah. And then eventually somebody came up with the spindle shape that we're used to now, which is kind of that weird. Kind of a weird diamond. It's an elongated diamond on one edge. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's cool. I still have a couple sets of the 20 sides, which were 2 10-sideds. Yeah, and we had to color one side in and leave the other side some other color so we could roll percentiles. It's kind of going way back for some of the youngins out there.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Like I said, older than dirt, right here.
Well, hopefully I'm not older than dirt yet, but like I said, I played for the first time in 1982, so I guess I'm up there. But I was 9. But no, that's interesting though. That's kind of, I think, the first time I've talked about that on the podcast. That I bring that up sometimes to some of the younger people I play with, and they're like, "You mean you had to buy incomplete dice? Like they didn't even come like ready to go?" And they're like, "No, you had to have a crayon and color them in." Yeah. So now I was wondering, since you guys started playing kind of way back, I kind of connected with this. I do like to ask, did you kind of start running games pretty quickly, or did you play for a while? So maybe Kurt.
Yeah, actually, I played pretty much right away, or became the GM right away, mainly because the individuals that I ran around with, I was the only one that actually had a job. So I had the money to buy the books.
Yeah.
So, and they kind of, after a couple of games, we let other people run it. And then they got to the point where pretty much the friends wouldn't play unless I was running the game. So that happened all through high school and into college. And then when I moved up to Indianapolis, I ran around and actually met a number of different people that played D&D. And so we go over there and they had their GM, and I'm kind of off the cuff, and I'm pretty sure Dave and Tony can attest to this when I've played in their games. I'm chaos. I tend to like to play chaotic characters, so it always threw the GM for a loop, especially the ideas that I'd come up with. So it kind of they kind of bounced. They're like, well, yeah, you don't quite. Nobody can kind of fit you into a mold. So yeah, I don't know if I can handle you as a player. I'm like, okay, so. And then I had the absolute luck of running into Dave and Tony at my martial arts studio, and Tony loves GMing. So I'm like, hey, I'll be a player for a while. What do you need me to do?
If you can't improvise, you can't keep up with Kurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did kind of mention the kind of the age-old curse there. If you buy the book, you're basically telling everybody you're going to be the GM.
Exactly.
Yeah. How about you, Dave? Did you start running games pretty quickly, or did you play for a while first?
Started by running games because kind of the first one in my area to get into it, because again, older than dirt. But as more people got interested in it, then we started kind of trying different things. So kind of the original homebrew type stuff was like, well, I would like to run a game set in, again, older than dirt. But if you know Julianne May's Milu, where they're talking about the many-colored land and the psychic abilities and stuff, is like, well, what if we could run something like that? So somebody's like, I've got an idea, and we're like, okay, well, we'll just all play. So people would try different ideas, and they'd look at different science fiction books they had, and we'd try to see if we could adapt the rules to make things work. Kind of started getting into basic understanding of how these rule systems work, but really cool stuff, really cool, interesting ways of playing that were different than the traditional D&D or traditional Travelers, and just definitely broke things up a little.
Okay. And then Tony, it sounds like you GM a lot then.
Yeah. I started GMing mostly because, much like Dave, I was like the first one in my area to get the books or discover the hobby. And so I would go out and be like, we've got to try this. And people were like, well, I have no idea what this is. So I'm like, well, I guess I'll have to show you. So I was the de facto game master a lot of times because not only was I the only one who had the books, I was the only one among a lot of my friends growing up that were at least initially aware of the hobby. That eventually changed, thankfully. But yeah, to start off, I did a lot of GMing.
Yeah. Do you have maybe like a favorite piece of GM advice for the listeners out there?
Certainly when it comes to Battlelords, the game is designed so that the characters, I describe it as you're over-equipped and under-trained, and the characters are going to screw up. Roll with it. Just as long as everybody's having fun, just go with it. Don't be afraid to take it off the rails. You can get them back on track eventually if you need to, but just, having fun is the most important thing. Don't be afraid to go off script.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, we've been kind of talking about Battlelords a little bit, but why don't you guys tell us a little bit more about Battlelords of the 23rd century. Now, to start off, though, it is a game with kind of a long history. Isn't that right?
Yeah, we celebrated our 30th anniversary for the game last year. So we're working on our 31st year. It was originally developed around 1990 by a guy named Larry Sims, and it was a military science fiction game, and he had just gotten out of the U.S. Army, and he based the game off of his experiences in the U.S. Armed Forces. So you'll see a lot of reoccurring themes in the game, like equipment being built by the lowest bidder, and all the characters are expendable and things like that.
Well, hopefully some of that's fiction.
Yes.
Said the quiet part out loud, Tony.
I did. But certainly the game has, there must be some truth in it, because the game has a lot of appeal for current and former armed forces personnel who love the game. And it may just be because there's some realistic portrayals of life in the armed forces in there. But the game's going on 30 years old. Larry ran it for probably 3 or 4 years, doing the convention circuit and promoting it. Eventually decided he wanted to do something else, sold it to his art director and his web designer, who kept that torch burning for more than 15 years. Mike and Aaron ran it, and they contacted us and they said, we've been doing this for almost 20 years. We're getting tired and we don't know what to do with it. And I did my best Star-Lord impersonation, and I contacted Dave and Kurt, and I said, I have part of an idea, part of a plan. And in 2017, we formed 23rd Century Productions and took over the helm of the game. And here we are.
How did they know to contact you?
We'd actually been writing supplements for them.
Okay.
And we'd been playing it since it came out. And we were infamous, at least Dave and I were initially.
Sorry.
Because the game is very crunchy. It's very tactical. And we had a ton of questions when we first tried it back around 1992. And we would email them all our questions. And initially they said, okay, no more than 10 a week because we had so many questions. And we sent them so many questions about the game system that eventually they compiled a book called the Super FAQ. And it was, I think, more than 30 pages long. So we were pretty familiar with the game system by then. And eventually they said, hey, do you want to start writing some of this stuff? Because clearly you guys know the game. And then that's how we got involved with them.
So side note, because I just have to say it.
Yeah.
Jerk moment, sort of, which is the other reason they know us. We were a bit, let's say, brazen. At Gen Con one year, we had printed and tape bound said Super FAQ and presented to them for signatures.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, make sure the creators don't forget you. That's absolutely right.
They know who we are.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so why don't you tell us a bit more about the game? Maybe let's start with the setting, and somebody who wants to tell us, we can talk about the setting and then we'll move into the system and some of that in a little bit.
Sure. I'll just jump in on setting. So there's a lot of different ways sci-fi can go, but if you keep it really, really high level, you kind of got more of a utopian feel and more dystopian. And we're definitely playing hard in that dystopian feel. There's definitely that dark humor undercurrent, which is again kind of coming back from that military background. So I like to say, if you liked some of the themes that were in Fifth Element, where you've got these megacorps and there's somebody at the top of their really, quote unquote, ivory tower or glass and steel tower that can fire thousands of people because they can. Mm-hmm. That's a way of thinking about Battlelords. If you've ever seen Judge Dredd and Mega City 1 and that kind of that overarching oppressive governments in control of a lot of things, working with corporations, again, that is kind of in that feel. The Empire with the lack of safety standards. There are no rails anywhere. We don't care about workers. You're expendable. We'll just get a new worker. Again, kind of playing in that feel, or Serenity with kind of that out on the frontier. You're on your own, and people may or may not be out to get you, but they certainly don't care if you die. Again, kind of that you're dark, definitely tending towards dark dystopian. There's megacorps. They run everything. Everyone works for one, even if it's a subsidiary of a subsidiary of a subsidiary. You still, where people live, where they work, what they do. Everything about lives and how they're populating the universe is really driven by what these companies do. And that's because the companies have been empowered by the government because they need things for this war effort. You got to do things, which kind of takes it to a piece of the puzzle as well. There's this intergalactic war going on with an invading force called the Arachnids. So you can kind of get into Starship Troopers. Would you like to know more?
Yes.
So we've got all these different themes. And so there's a lot of different ways to play in that universe. We've got a whole bunch of backstory, and people don't have to play in that backstory. But the intent is really to give people a rich storied area that they can play in, and they can pick on the themes that they want and set the others to the side. And so we've tried to expand with the current edition out of the more traditional, you're mercenaries or soldiers, into you can get into exploration, you can get into corporate espionage. And so there's these other piracy. So there's other ways of playing in the same space that tug on different themes, so you can be out on the edges, kind of like in Serenity, but you're trying to explore and survive and just taking odd jobs and getting from place to place. Also feels kind of almost like Original Traveler, but that wasn't quite as dystopian. You can play from a mercenary perspective. You can play from a soldier perspective. So there's all these different ways of thinking about where you want to position a team within the universe of Battlelords and how you want to interact with them. But the overarching themes of your boss is out for themselves, and you may or may not get the great job, depending on how happy you're keeping your boss. Something to keep in mind.
No, it sounds great. It sounds like very diverse as well. So it's not just a kind of a Starship Troopers, but it also pulls in some kind of free trader or some cyberpunk elements as well.
Definitely.
Okay. Does Kurt or Tony, do you want to add anything to the setting discussion?
Well, yeah, I can add on the species. So basically part of you've got the megacorps running everything, but also in the background, you've got a number of different species in the game that some of them don't quite like each other. They've been at war. They've fought, tried to destroy each other utterly at one point in time in their history. And now they're kind of being forced to work together. So not only do you have, your normal interactions between corporations and, their amenity, but now you have to deal with species and throwing them together in a group where they may not like each other. And some of them might even try to kill each other. It's so you have to factor all that stuff into your group. And so it makes for it can be quite an exciting dynamic.
Could you tell us maybe a couple examples of a species?
Well, like the Eridani and the Fintari, two of the main species in there that were in the original books that just literally hate each other. The Eridani are very militaristic, very samurai type, honorable, in their mind type fighters, where the Fintari are, if I can get away with it, it's legal. So, you're my boss. If I can kill you, I get your spot.
Yeah.
So, and those two species have fought a war for, what was it, about a couple hundred years at least. And then they get back together, and now they're being forced to work together. So neither one really trusts the other, but now they have to work together. And the same thing with another series, the Scissorak, which are bipedal cats that can also, they run on four legs, but they can walk if they need to on two. And then the Pythonians, which are two subspecies, the ram and the python lizards. The python lizards are about 3 meters tall, the rams are about 3 meters tall and are like literally walking mountains of muscles. And here, so you've got these cats that were just literally slaughtering them. So, you put those two in a group together, and there's bound to be some conflicts, especially since the cats are all female, and the rams are mostly male. So they don't, both species wise, they don't like each other, and gender wise, they don't even like each other. So you get those thrown together in a single mercenary outfit, and well, at some point they're bound to come to blows, and you're not real sure which one's going to win.
All right. Very cool. What about I think Dave mentioned the arachnids. What about those?
So the arachnids they're on their third invasion into Alliance space. And Kurt was talking about all these species. They've basically been forced into this cooperative alliance to defend their space from the invading arachnids. And the arachnids is sort of a generic term for these group of their techno-organic monstrosities. And they use a lot of horde tactics and mass combat tactics, because most of their warriors are genetically engineered and cybernetically augmented, and they just send them in mass. So as a result of their repeated invasions into Alliance space, all of these species have sort of come to this pact, where a mutual defense pact, so to speak, to help fend them off. And one of the other threats they're also dealing with is, or they're called the Atlanteans. They're basically these nanotech swarms. And they're a little less direct than the arachnids, because they can look like whoever or whatever they want. So they've begun to infiltrate the alliance, and that's created some problems because you never know where one will pop up. It definitely makes for an interesting dynamic in terms of the characters being forced to work together.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. And obviously you have 30 years of history behind it as well. So it sounds like there's a lot of layers there. So that is really cool. Now, is it a kind of a class-based system? Or how do players, what kind of characters can they make?
I'll let Dave take this one, but I'll summarize it by saying it's skill-based, not class-based. Dave, this is Dave's favorite topic.
So when we look at game systems, they kind of fall into a couple main categories. More of a archetype-based, like traditional D&D. You're a fighter, you do fighting stuff. You get a level, you do more fighting stuff, and you're pretty much locked into a very specific set of capabilities. And as D&D's gone along, they've added in other things like feats and things to kind of tweak it a little bit, but more or less, actually there's even a rollback to kind of more of a set path again with, I think, 4th edition. Anyway, you kind of have that set archetype, and that is what it is. And then you've got kind of the other kind of side of things where you have like point-based, like a Champions or DC Heroes, where you literally can build anything you want. And so that's where we find Battlelords. We're in that it's a skill-based system. It's point-based. You buy your skills. You figure out what you want to do. And so it's very, very flexible and granular and very good at evolving over time. You may start off thinking, I'm going to do corporate espionage, and you find that you need to add combat skills. So you go in that direction. Then you find maybe you need to be able to hack into things better. And so you start building computer skills, and then you can just continue to evolve your character as you go. So it's a lot more granular. And so that's where we kind of, from an advice perspective, just encourage people, think about the style of gameplay you want, and what would a good character be like. If you can think of a movie, I want to be this character from this movie because it's in the type of play that we're going to have. So if you're in Starship Troopers, what are those characters' roles in that? Or Fifth Element, what are the different roles you see in Fifth Element? And you can just you can pick a movie that fits the genre you're going to be playing in, and kind of think, what are the skills that are needed? And then you can start to build a backstory that fits that character, choose the skills that fit that character. And as you go over time, you start to evolve your own story, and then you start to figure out what skills you want to add to help support and build that new story, and help you get through the kinds of gameplay you're actually doing at the time. So you might choose to start off without any skills at flying a starship, and over time you find you need to be able to fly one. So you learn how to do that. Or maybe you need to run mecha, and you want to learn how to, quote unquote, pilot a mech. So you can do all those kinds of things. You just kind of figure out where you want to be to begin with, and then where do you think you want to go next, and just slowly over time invest in those skills.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Now, for those listening, what dice does it use?
It's Battlelords is a percentile-based system. It always has been. I've always been of the opinion that it's easiest, at least in terms for me, to wrap my head around. You've got a 50% chance to succeed. I can wrap my head around that. You got a 20% chance to succeed. Everything in the game is run on a lower is better system, except for damage. So if you have to make a skill check or an attribute check, or you're generating a matrix, which are the psychic powers some of the species have, lower is always better when you make your roll. One is a critical success. Double zero, or as we call them, double Zod, is a critical failure. And that was one of the things that we standardized in the current edition, is to make sure lower is better across the board for everything, again, other than damage.
Of course, I'm familiar with some of the old games like Fast Star Trek, which used the percentile system. But I always thought the percentile system was an interesting system because, like you said, it does give you kind of a clear mark to say, well, here's success or failure, especially when you use a system that has a ton of skills. So I assume that Battlelords has a lot of skills that you can learn.
I think we actually cut them down. Originally, it had in the main core book, it was over like 126, and then with the additional add-on books, they added even more skills. And I believe we got it down to what, 106, Tony?
I think we got it under 100, but the prior editions, they were pushing close to 200 skills.
Yes. So, and they cover a lot. I mean, and we did consolidate some like the academic skills. So, if you want to be good at math, you would take academic math. So it's still got sub skills in there on it, but we generalized them. It's like, okay, there's really no reason to have an individual laid out for each and every one of them. But there's still core skills in there like skiing, skiing and snowboarding. So you may be on a nice planet. You may need to travel or traverse with it. So they're still there.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Now, you had mentioned, or somebody mentioned, that the game was very tactical. Could somebody explain that?
Yeah, I think Kurt, do you want to go?
I was going to say, that's Tony's baby there.
I think Battlelords as a system is probably most famous for its armor mechanics. And without going into too much detail, basically what it boils down to is it's an armored infantry combat game for the most part. And you can get a suit of armor, and you can get a helmet, and you can customize it to your heart's content. And we go from basic body armor all the way up to mechanized battle armor, and then on to mecha. But one of the core concepts is there is a defense for everything, but you cannot afford all of them, nor can you fit all of them in your armor. So diversity of weapons is really one of the keys in Battlelords. You're going to hit your opponent's armor with a mix of weapons to find that weakness, that weak spot in the armor, because he or she can't defend against everything. And eventually you're going to find something that suit of armor is not equipped to handle. And that's what you hammer them with. So we have a great deal of weapon diversity and armor diversity. And it makes, for a bit of a chess match, if you were. And then the combat system itself is also designed to be tactical in terms of it rewards creative thinking as opposed to I'm just going to keep running at it and hit it. Now,
as you're describing the system, I'm wondering just what do you think of kind of the push in some more contemporary games just to go like rules light?
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was going to say. So we've got something we've put out there called our Quick Start rules, and that's honestly where we play all of our con games. It runs fairly lightweight for a kind of tactical game, and I would say one of the other things that we've done to try to really address a lot of the crunchiness factor that really shines is that with the way we've organized the character sheet, really all the things that anyone needs to play are right there on the sheet. And that's where we also encourage GMs, be ready to improvise a little bit. You don't have to go and look up on page 227, the combat section, that it says that when somebody's targeting somebody's eye in a moving vehicle at 400 kilometers an hour, that the penalties will be this. You don't have to go to that. You can. It's in there. Don't get me wrong. But our point is just feel free to improvise and say, you know what? You're going to have a real hard time. I'm going to give you a -80. This time, go. And so by going to more of that lightweight rules, people can kind of go, I've got the number that I need to hit here on my sheet. I know what the number is that I've got to do some real simple math. -80. Did I roll under that? Done. And so it can handle some fairly complex situations without having to get into, a encyclopedia of all the different penalties you could assign. Not to say we don't have a lot of those. We do have a lot of examples just to help people understand. But, once you get into gameplay, doesn't always matter as much. And again, we encourage people to think of, will it be fun? Can you do that? Yeah. Should you do that? No. But would it be funny? Oh, yeah. Then go. Do it. Just an example of that, we had in one of the Gen Con sessions, we had somebody who had wanted to play an Eridani. There wasn't one available for this scenario that I had. And we'd kind of cobbled one together, but we had to stop so we could kind of get the game going. His main character died. He's like, hey, you're at a hospital, right? This Eridani jumps out of a bed. I'm like, oh, that's just awesome. We're running with that. And so he runs into battle. They're fighting this arachnid, big boss battle scene kind of going on. his leg gets blown off, and he's like, can I like jump? And he has like his arms damaged. He's like barely standing, but he's like, I'm an Eridani. I will not go quietly. I will fight until the end. Can I throw my sword into the air, jump, flip over him, hook around him with one leg, grab with my good arm, and just hack at him until I die? Like, that's going to be hard. But if you roll well, sure. It's like he rolls first time. I'm like, you jump, you throw this in the air, you do a flip, blood's flying everywhere. You reach up, grab your sword. What's your hit? And he rolls a hit and he hits on him. It's like, holy cow. And you're beating on him. He falls to the ground. It's like, yes, medic.
Like Dave was saying, the rules are really scalable. You can start with what's in the quick start rules and then just add as much or as little detail as you want. One of the other things we've done to address, I guess, sort of the more modern push for streamlined games is we are developing a version of the Battlelords setting for the Savage Worlds rule set. And that's currently in play testing right now. So eventually, hopefully in a year or so, you'll be able to play Savage Battlelords, which uses the Savage Worlds rules.
And I would say one last thing that we did was we took a lot of time with the character sheet and changing the rules so that 90% of the work that you do for the game is at character creation. So pretty much once you get your character sheet filled out and everything in there, the games themselves, it's just rolling the dice. I mean, all your stuff is on there. Everything that you need to play the game is on that sheet. So it's designed to go, okay, I need to do that up front, maybe take an hour, and then we go. And then 2 sessions later, okay, I've got to update my armor. That's real quick, couple fixes here and there, and we're good. So, I mean, a lot of it is the front end. We just loaded on that. And we tried to take care of some of that with adding different character sheets and different species and that in the quick start rules, as well as our latest book, Charlie Foxtrot, gives you kind of an idea of characters to just pick and go.
When I'm running games at Gen Con, the players and even myself as the game master, I never crack in that rule book. The only time I ever look inside the rule book during a game is for the critical hit chart, and that's the fun part.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I guess a follow-up question I kind of missed when we were talking about skills. How is skill advancement handled?
So experience is really just on a per game session basis, and again, point-based system. No surprise. A certain amount of there's a range that's given for GMs that as they run sessions, they kind of pick on the continuum where people are landing, typically in the 2 to 3 per game session perspective, and then each skill has a different cost. So some are very expensive, some are a little cheaper, some are really cheap, like learning a new language. And so people just accumulate points to a certain level, and then when they're ready, they spend them. And so they kind of have this bank of points that they're constantly growing and then spending, and then growing and then spending. And just dynamically, you know what? I want a couple more levels of this. Oh, now I want a couple of levels of that. Ooh, I want to build a whole brand new skill. And that's a little more expensive for that first level, but then they take off from there and start buying more levels of that. It also allows, Tony mentioned kind of those psychic species like the Mitzakans and the Zen. And just because people are more familiar with D&D, think of them like spellcasters. So they have the ability to choose to be strictly about the air quotes spellcasting aspect of things with their psychic powers and just go only in that track. Or they can choose to spend some energy on getting, more traditional combat skills like firing guns and somewhere in the middle. So they've got this whole continuum they can play in, and the air quotes spells or the abilities that they have run the same way. They spend their skill points on, I have a new cool spell.
I guess you said you guys took over in 2017, and you mentioned kind of normalizing some of the and that. What have you guys been up to since you've taken over the game?
We successfully kickstarted the new edition of the game. Our goal when we did that was to not change it so much as to streamline it and to clarify any ambiguity in the game. We wanted to make it faster and easier, but still keep Battlelords that Battlelords feel. And the other goal we had was to bring it up to modern production standards. The last edition of the game was softcover black and white. The new version is hardback, full cover, glossy throughout. And we wanted to make it as much art book as role-playing game book. The art in the book is fantastic. People can actually download a free interior preview of the book on DriveThruRPG just to see some of the amazing art we've got in there. After that, we kickstarted our second book, Charlie Foxtrot. I'll let Dave or Kurt talk about that. But that is at the printers right now.
Yeah, please, Kurt or Dave, you want to talk about Charlie Foxtrot?
Sure. I'll go. You want to take it? Okay.
Go ahead and start, and I'll finish.
All righty. So Charlie Foxtrot is, if you're familiar with military vernacular, it refers to the alphanumeric call signs that they use in the military. Mm-hmm. And so you can understand what the Charlie and the Foxtrot ends up meaning is generally the cluster.
It's a major screw up. Let's put it
yes. So we designed the second book as a basically group of one-shot adventures that the moment you start, something's going to go wrong. You know it. It's just it can't be this easy. And so as soon as you get into it, things start going right and left. And it's how the players adjust to it, how the GM plus adjust to it. But it just kind of shows you what makes Battlelords in our mind. So there's everything from starting characters. Basically, you're fresh off the ship, recruited by the one of the megacorps as a mercenary, to we've got extraction teams where you're going in as an espionage team, to soldiers fighting to save the day from the arachnid hordes, to pirates who are, again, going in there to get the booty. So it's pretty much all over the board. And then the last one of the last ones that actually was a new edition this last year, I believe, or the Gen Con the year before last, which was colony inspection. You're just going out there doing your job. They make you take this stuff to do this because you might run into pirates. So that's the only reason you know how to use a gun. The rest of the time you're engineers or pilots or mechanics. And, all of a sudden you're thrown in the middle of something and you're like, what do I do? So I think that was the idea behind it, was to just show variety of weapons and skills and what you can do with the game.
And then Dave?
He pretty much covered everything I was thinking of. But so in summary, then we've got that we've highlighted each of the types of gameplay that are pretty typical styles of gameplay. They're not the only ones, but they're the ones that people tend to gravitate towards: pirate, exploration, mercenary, and soldier, which are slightly different from each other, believe it or not. That corporate espionage kind of an angle. So you've got lots of different ways of doing it. It all comes back to teams of people coming together, trying to figure out how to work together to solve the problem they've got, which turns out to be not the problem they were given, but rather what's happened since then, and potentially as a consequence of some of the things they've chosen to do along the way.
Right as we're going to wrap up, you had mentioned, I think Tony had mentioned a little game master advice for people running Battlelords. Do you have some other advice for if somebody's picking up Battlelords? What should they know, or how should they? What should they know to run a really cool campaign in Battlelords?
The quick start rules is definitely the place to start because it gives you all the basics. And you can add detail from there. But if you're going to run a campaign in Battlelords, and we actually detail how to run short and long-term campaigns in the Game Master section in the current edition, I would say that my advice would be to have an overarching goal, a start point and end point, and then just have fun in between. Dave and Kurt probably have different advice, but I think that falls on the Battlelords rule of be prepared to improvise, embrace when things go off the rails. That's the Battlelords way. I tell people there's the right way, the wrong way, and the Battlelords way.
All right, Kurt.
The
Dave,
Battlelords.
Yeah,
I was just going to jump on that comment. The Battlelords way sounds an awful lot like where you hear the origination of Charlie Foxtrot. Adapt, improvise, and overcome. So that's kind of the kind of the theme: adapt, improvise, and overcome. The players are going to come up with something that's just out of left field, like that one player we had a blast with at Gen Con. It's like, hey, this is a hospital. There's an Aerodani soldier. He jumps up out of the Benny. Like, that's not in the script here. You're like, where does it say in the rules you can do this? That you can't go back to that. You've got to just adapt. It's like, that's kind of cool. I like where you're going. Let's play with this. And so by having that flexibility, that really gives you a lot of, you have to just be comfortable that things can go wrong too. I guess that'd be another piece of advice. It's okay if things go horribly wrong. Sometimes you just need to stop a game session and then say, okay, this is not really as fun as I thought it was going to be. Can we agree to try to play with this a little bit and change things up or whatever? Just try to get it back to a kind of more of a fun theme. In that vein, if you adapt and you don't have a particular driving plot line or the characters take you in a different direction, you can end up in some interesting places. One of the game sessions that I ran ended up becoming a mercenary team that took over a ship. They turned it into a cruise line, and eventually they were just running a company, which, as you can imagine, kind of got boring after a bit. Life happens. Adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say start simple. I mean, when you come into Battlelords, our book is 544 pages long, and it is packed full of information. We tried not to skimp or repeat things too many times. So start small, start with a quick start guide, take it simple your first couple times, go rules light, bend them, break them, whatever you need to do to have your fun until you get to that point where you understand the system backwards and forward, because it is pretty. A lot of people call it crunchy. It's pretty straightforward. After the streamline, there's not we made sure we weren't going to go out and go, oh, this is a special case, or, oh, this is a special case, or this is one off. Pretty much it's all baked into there. So once you understand the rules, you can run it with just about anything you want to do. But take your time. You'll get there.
All right.
And the system really rewards people for digging in. That's how we developed it. Is you can start streamlined, you can start with the basics, but there are really some I don't want to say Easter eggs, but there's some rewards for people who want to delve into the system and really tinker with it. It's designed for that.
There's a definite, if you think like games like Magic the Gathering, where this card does something and that card does something. They're not terribly impressive on their own, but if you put the two together, all of a sudden really cool stuff happens. There's definitely scenarios where you take this weapon, it's okay. That weapon, it's okay. But you put the two together and all of a sudden you're dropping people left and right. It's like, you take that weapon, I'll take this weapon. We work together as a team. We can take people out until we run into this defense, and then we got a problem. So we get another buddy. You can do that one.
That sounds awesome. All right. Well, where can people find Battlelords of the 23rd Century?
We're on most social media platforms. We're Battlelords RPG on Twitter. We're Facebook.com/Battlelords. We've got an Instagram site. Probably best off just searching for Battlelords. The name is like Battlelords _of or the _23rd Century. I didn't really think that one through when I made it. We also have a Discord. Our website is battlelords.com. We're pretty easy to locate. We've got a bunch of products in the pipeline currently, one of which we'll get ready to release in a day or two, called Warmonger's Guide, which is sort of like a player's companion. And then we've got our Fully Armored, which is our gear, armor, and weapons book, which is also in development. So we've got a lot of pokers in the fire and a lot of products in the pipeline.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I will be sure to put links to your website and to your social media in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. So anybody who's listening can just head over there, and they will be able to find all the links and check out Battlelords. So Tony, Kurt, Dave, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate coming.
Thanks again for having us.
Yes, thanks very much for having us, Matt.
All right, guys. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Tony, Dave, and Kurt. I had a blast talking to them. So if you were intrigued by what you heard, in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com, I have placed links where you can find the Battlelords of the 23rd Century, the role-playing game, as well as their new source book. Check it out. it is definitely worthwhile. Now, guys, if you want some free stuff, head over to dicegeeks.com/free. You'll get 10 free dungeon maps. You'll never miss an episode of this show. And each and every Friday, you'll get an email update from me letting you know what is going on in this realm I like to call Dice Geeks. Also, guys, if you want this show to continue, please consider supporting it financially on patreon.com/dicegeeks. Every little bit of support goes a long, long way, I assure you. And also, if you just want to rate, subscribe, like, review, those things are extremely helpful as well. I thank you so much for listening and taking time to put me in your earbuds or wherever you're listening. I really appreciate it. I truly do. So until next week, keep gaming.